So in 1980, a man was told a volcano was going to erupt directly on top of his house. He didn't just ignore the warning, he became famous for ignoring it. Front page of the New York Times, a helicopter ride, children sending him fan mail. 63 days later, he was buried under 150 feet of ash and lava. And here's the uncomfortable part. I'm not telling you this story because I think you might get buried by a volcano. I'm telling you this story because a lot of you listening right now are doing exactly the same thing with your money, and you don't even realize it. So stick with me for the next 20 minutes because by the end, I'm going to show you the actual numbers on what that mistake cost. And it's not measured in ash or lava. It's measured in millions. So welcome back. My name's Mike Adams. I'm founder of Adams Financial Concepts, and today's episode has a title I want you to actually sit with: the man who wouldn't leave the volcano, and why you might be doing the same thing with your money. And here's what I mean by that. And here's my promise for the next 20 minutes. Most people have a financial plan. Almost nobody has a plan that's built for things that have never happened before. Because here's the truth. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. A pandemic, a market shock, no one predicted. A health crisis that wipes out a lifetime of savings in 24 months. Your plan was probably not built for that, and I want to show you why. But first, I have to finish the story about the man on the mountain because it gets stranger than you'd expect. And I promise you, there's a twist toward the end of this episode that involves a homeless man, a lawnmower, and a decision that changed the rest of someone's life. We'll get there, but don't skip ahead. His name was Harry Truman, not the president, not Harry S. Truman, the president, Harry Randall Truman, a cantankerous old lodge owner who lived at the base of Mount St. Helens on the shore of Spirit Lake. He lived there for over 50 years. And Harry was a character before any of this happened. He once got a park ranger so drunk the man passed out, just so Harry could burn a brush pile without getting caught. He drove a pink 1957 Cadillac like he owned the mountain. In a lot of ways, he did. And here's the thing about Harry. He knew the mountain. He had lived on that mountain for over 50 years. And for decades, it had rumbled a little, steamed a little, never done anything worse. So when geologists started warning him in 1979 and 1980 that Mount St. Helens was waking up and that he sat directly in the most likely path of lava flow, Harry just laughed it off. His neighbors packed up. They were grumbling, but they left. But not Harry. And here's what gets almost unbelievable. Harry became a celebrity for staying and refusing to do what the government wanted him to do. Reporters flew in. A class of school children sent him a banner that said, quote, "Harry, we love you." He was so touched he rented a helicopter just to go thank them in person. Harry made the front page of the New York Times, of Time magazine, and Newsweek, all because he refused to do what the government told him he should do. His family begged him to leave, and his response, and quote, "They'll never get me off this mountain. Spirit Lake and Mount St. Helens are a part of me. They're mine. They're as much a part of me as my arms and legs." That was Harry. On May 18th, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted. The entire north face of the mountain collapsed. A wall of molten rock swept down over Spirit Lake and directly over Harry. He had a plan. He evaluated the risk on his own terms, and he was completely satisfied with it. He was wrong. Now, before we go further, I want to pause here because this is exactly the moment when people either lean in or check out. I'm not going to let you check out. If any part of that story made you think about your own financial plan, not because you think there's a volcano coming, but because you've had that nagging feeling that your plan might not hold up to something unexpected, I want to make this easy for you. You don't have to wait until the end of the episode to do something about it. Right now, today, you can set an appointment directly on my calendar. It takes about 90 seconds. Bring your most recent statements, and in 20 minutes, we'll give you a straight, no pressure, second opinion. The link is in the show notes and description. Just look for Book a Time with Mike. Okay, so let's back to the story, because there's a bigger version of Harry's Mountain that people have never even heard of, and it's going to change how you think of the unexpected. Here's something interesting. Mount St. Helens barely made a dent in the U.S. economy. Locally, in the state of Washington, it was fairly devastating. Ash everywhere, slowed down things. Nationally, almost invisible. So why am I telling you this story? Because Mount St. Helens isn't even close to the worst case scenario nature's capable of. In 1815, Mount Tambora in Indonesia erupted with 40 times the force of Mount St. Helens. It threw ash and rock over 12 miles into the sky. Think about it. Commercial jets fly at 8 miles. A jet flying over Mount Tambora would have been burned up with molten lava. The dust cloud was so thick from that eruption and covered so much of the earth that it froze laundry hanging on the lines in New England, half a world away. That ash cloud wiped out the entire corn harvest in the UK that year. That was 1815. 74,000 years before that, Mount Toba erupted with 40 times the force of Mount Tambora, an eruption so massive it nearly wiped out human life on Earth. And I'm not telling you this because I think a supervolcano is coming for your portfolio. I'm telling you this because of one simple idea. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. Nobody in 2019 predicted a pandemic that would kill over a million Americans and 7 million people worldwide, along with shutting down most of the businesses worldwide, an economic shock wave that touched every single portfolio in the country. Nobody predicted it because it hadn't happened in living memory. And then it happened. It might not be a pandemic next time. It could be a market shock, a geopolitical event, something none of us have ever imagined to name yet. The specifics don't matter. What matters is this. Most financial plans are built for a world as it has always been and continues. The world as it might become is not part of that plan. And that's why we build plans differently at Adams Financial Concepts. More of that in a few minutes. But first, I need to tell you a number that I think is going to bother you because it bothers me a whole lot. And I'm behind in moving the slides. And here's the number. More than 25% of clients say they're unhappy with their current financial advisor. 1 in 4 people listening to this right now statistically falls into that group. And here's the second number that should really bother you. Only about 3% of those people ever actually leave. Think about that gap. A quarter of the people know something isn't working, but 97% do nothing about it anyway. That gap isn't caused by state satisfaction. It's called by inertia. Inertia always has a script that tells you to keep frozen. And let me walk you through the script, because I bet money that if you're one of those people, one of those 25%, you've probably rationalized it this way. There's 5 rationalizations. 1, It's too much of a hassle. People imagine weeks of frozen accounts, mountains of paperwork. In reality, transferring assets is routine. Your new advisor does the heavy lifting. The hassle in your head is always bigger than the hassle in reality. Second reason, a new advisor might be no better or worse. That's not caution. That's fear wearing caution's clothes, and it's fixable. You can look at real, verifiable numbers before you move a single dollar. Third reason, I've already paid so much in fees. I might as well stick it out. That's the sunk cost fallacy, and it runs completely backwards. Whatever you've already paid in fees is gone either way. The only question that matters is what you do for the next 10 years and what they look like. Staying out of stubbornness is exactly how mediocre returns compound for another decade. Fourth reason, the market's down for everyone. My situation is complicated. Sometimes true, often just a story. A story you're telling yourself instead of comparing your account to what's actually achievable. And the fifth reason, my advisor handles my annuities and my legacy accounts. It's too tangled to move. Complexity is real, but it's not permanent. Complicated accounts get untangled every single day by people who do exactly that for a living. Every one of those thoughts feels reasonable in the moment. That's exactly what makes them dangerous. They don't feel like excuses. They feel like wisdom. Randall Truman didn't think he was being reckless. He thought he was being experienced. The fact is, when you're listening to this, you're paying for professional service. If it isn't performing, discomfort's not a good reason. It's not enough to keep paying for underperformance year after year. So here's what we do differently. And this connects directly back to Harry on the Mountain. At Adams Financial Concepts, our entire philosophy is built around one idea: a margin of safety. We want our clients to have more money than they will ever actually need. Not because more is always better for its own sake, but because a bigger cushion is what protects you when something unexpected happens. Most financial plans are built around a 95 or 97% probability of success, using an average return of around 5%, which is what studies show the typical financial planner delivers. Our client agreement sets a different target: to outperform the Standard & Poor's 500 with dividends reinvested over a 5 to 10 year horizon. That also means we accept more volatility along the way. We accept greater ups and downs in pursuit of bigger long-term margin. And let me give you the math. 500,000 invested for 25 years at 5% grows to about 1.58 million. That same 500,000 at 15% grows to 16.4 million. That's not a rounding error. That's the difference between a plan that survives an emergency and one that doesn't. Harry Truman was completely satisfied with what he knew about his mountain, and for decades it had been steady. He trusted his own experience and genuinely believed he had enough margin. We know that he didn't. Change is really difficult. Lots of reason to rationalize, lots of reason to think that you can depend upon experience, a lot of reasons to think that because a financial advisor has the title financial advisor, one is the same. Don't wait to find out the same way that Harry found out. Okay. I promised you a story involving a homeless man, a lawnmower, and a decision that changed the rest of someone's life. And here it is. Back in 1987, I was a brand new stockbroker. That's what they called us before financial advisor was the term. I opened an account for a client named Frank. He was a retired postman who'd saved $216,000 over his career. Frank decided to split the money, half with me, half with another broker at a major firm. For years, every time we talked, I'd suggest he consider consolidating everything with me. I'm sure the other broker was making the same pitch in reverse. Eventually, I quit asking. 10 years later, after we started, Frank called me and said his account with me had crossed $1 million, and he wanted to buy me lunch. Over that lunch, he told me he wanted to move the rest of his money over to. I asked him how the other account had done. He described a beautifully built plan, graphs and pie charts, broad diversification, everything a textbook plan is supposed to have. Beautiful. In 10 years, that account had grown from 108,000 to 140,000. My side, over exactly the same period of time, had grown from 108,000 to over 1 million. Frank did eventually move his money to me. I had suggested, actually, after he told me that he keep the money with the other broker so that he would appreciate what I did. He didn't. He moved the money to me. And here's the part that I didn't see coming. Within 12 months, Frank was approached outside his home by a homeless man who offered to mow his lawn for $20. Frank had a similar offer from the same guy a few months earlier, and the guy took the $20 and never mowed his lawn. So Frank said no. He didn't mow my lawn. And the man didn't take it well. He beat Frank to the ground, kicked him repeatedly in the head, and Frank suffered permanent, severe brain damage. But because Frank had the financial resources, because I had grown his account, he was able to afford specialized, long-term brain injury care for the next 20 years of his life until he actually passed away at the age of 94. Had all of his money stayed with the other advisor, growing at a fraction of that rate, he almost certainly would have become a ward of the state. And I don't tell that story because it's typical. Thank God, very few people will go through anything like that. I tell it because it's the clearest illustration of what I have of a larger than necessary nest egg is actually for. It was never about being richer for its own sake. It was about having option when life stops following the plan. And the odds of needing those options are higher than most people want to believe. Roughly 40% of Americans will develop cancer in their lifetime. Think about that. 40% of Americans will develop cancer in their lifetime. Of those, 1 in 4 will exhaust their entire life savings within 2 years of that diagnosis. Those are actual statistics, not something I'm just making up, actual statistics. That works out to roughly 1 in 10 Americans financially will be wiped out by cancer alone. And medical debt remains the #1 cause of bankruptcy in this country. #1 cause of bankruptcy. Doesn't take a catastrophe. A recent Goldman Sachs and Prudential study found that 1 in 5 people will still run out of money in retirement, even withdrawing a conservative fixed 3.5% a year. These are people with careful plans, sizable savings that on paper looked like they'd last a lifetime. So here's something you can do the second this episode ends, and it costs you nothing. Pull up your own account statements. Take your value at the end of June 2026 and divide it by the value at the end of 2025. How much has your account grown between June of 25 and June of 26? Over those last 12 months, the S&P total return was up 22%. Our clients, as a composite, were up even more than that. So how does your account compare? If that number makes you feel a little uncomfortable, sit in that discomfort for just a second, because it's the exact same comfort behind the realization that I walked through earlier. Too much a hassle. Maybe it wouldn't be any better. I've already put in the time. None of those thoughts changed the number you just calculated. They only postpone dealing with it. So let's bring it all the way back to where we started. 25% of people listening to this right now on some level, know they deserve better than what they're getting. 97% of the group will do absolutely nothing about it. Not because staying in the right decision, but because inertia feels safe and change is very, very difficult. Harry Truman had 50 years of evidence that his mountain was safe. He had a plan. He trusted it completely, and it cost him everything. Don't let "it's too much of a hassle" be your version of "I think it shot its wad." Don't let "my situation is complicated" be the last thing you tell yourself before finding out the hard way that it wasn't as safe as you thought. Here's what I want you to do in the next 60 seconds, not the next 60 days. Go to the link in the show notes and set an appointment on my calendar. Bring your most recent statement. In 20 minutes, I'll give you a direct, no obligation second opinion. Not a salesman, not a sales pitch, a comparison. If your current advisor is genuinely serving you, I'll tell you that, honestly to your face. But if the numbers tell a different story, isn't 20 minutes worth it? Rather than waiting for your own Harry Truman moment to find out? I'm Mike Adams. This is Adams Financial Concepts, and I'll see you